Thanks so much for coming. I'd like to welcome everyone to Martin's celebration. This is 50 years. Thank you for everyone for coming here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin people have lived on this land since time immemorial, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. It's certainly a privilege to be here and host this event for Martin Cleary. If you don't know me, I'm Dan Plouffe, run the Ottawa sports pages. We cover high schools, universities, community, and elite amateur sport. And if you know Martin, that's his beat, right? Certainly a big inspiration for us was the work that he did. It's a passion for me too to be able to tell those stories. I saw kind of the need to create a publication a dozen years ago now. Traditional newsrooms were shrinking a little, but there was still so many great stories to tell on the amateur sports beat. I truly doubt that the Ottawa sports pages would exist without Martin's work.
50 years. For 50 years, Martin Cleary has been covering sports in Ottawa. From typewriter to Twitter, that's over 10,000 reports on the local amateur sports scene. The journey started in 1973, when Martin graduated from Ryerson University Journalism and was hired as a summer student at the Ottawa Citizen.
I worked 6 weeks of nights, 6 weeks of days, and then 12 weeks in sports. That was a really good rotation, and got lots out of it. Had a chance to really see the city, which I didn't know, meet some wonderful people, cover some interesting assignments.
One of Martin's first assignments was covering a sailing regatta at Britannia Yacht Club.
I had no idea about sailing, but the publisher at the time, R.W. Southam, was a big sailing fan, so it was a must cover, and not too much pressure.
At the end of his 4 days of coverage, Martin got a letter from Southam saying that he really enjoyed reading his coverage of the event, and thus began Martin's 39-year run as a full-time reporter in the Citizen Sports Department. During that time, he covered 6 Olympic Games live. The first was the 1976 Olympics in Montreal, though the sudden sailing guru was sent to Kingston, the site of the sailing competitions.
I covered the sailing. I figured, well, I better go out in the water and take a look and follow the races. Well, I had eaten before, or I can't remember if I eaten before or ate out there, but whatever it was, I wasn't feeling well on the water like an hour before the race. So somebody gave me bad advice. They said, well, just go back into the little cabin there and you'll be fine. Well, no, that wasn't fine. I wasn't fine. That wasn't good.
Though he didn't require medical treatment, Martin later met a healthcare professional named Nancy at a party through someone who'd worked at the media center.
We had a good conversation and started a date, and you know, everything turned out very well. We have had 2 children. Andrew, who was a personal trainer in Toronto, and Emily, who has a good sporting background, and she's the teacher at Earl of March Secondary School, where she attended school. Andrew and Emily are both very sports-minded and active, and it's good to see. It's good to see that they take good care of themselves, and we're very proud of them for that.
Martin Cleary has received numerous honors in his career. He was Canada's Sports Writer of the Year for 1982, and the Ottawa Sports Awards gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award for Media in 2007. He continues to receive frequent messages from athletes, coaches, and readers who are appreciative of his work.
It's satisfying to do, and it's good for me to sort of keep in touch with the sports community. I still enjoy it, and I think it keeps me younger, not young, but younger, and it's a nice thing to look forward to.
Martin has followed some of Ottawa's best athletes of all time, from the local level all the way to the Olympic podium, like Elizabeth Manley, Christina Groves, and Glenroy Gilbert. He's covered piles of world and national championships in about 60 sports. But what many people feel sets him apart is his unmatched dedication to the lower levels of sport. Martin had a long-running Sports Roots page in The Citizen to showcase local sports topics, and his high school sports blog and high school best section were pioneering projects as well.
And it's necessary because there's just not enough of that these days, and whether it's newspapers, TV, or radio, it's something that's fallen to the wayside, unfortunately, because these athletes will be your future competitors at World Championships, Olympics, and athletes who could bring great recognition to the city. So it's nice that I can follow them from as early as possible to tell their story.
Martin retired from full-time work with The Citizen in 2012, but his passion persisted for the local sports beat. He continued to write a bi-weekly High Achievers column for The Citizen and The Sun until COVID hit.
But April of 2020, I was noticing that there was still news out there about Ottawa amateur sports, and nobody was touching it. It wasn't being written or talked about anywhere, so I figured, well, I'll put it on my Twitter account. I'll write a story and put it on my Twitter account. And ever since then, I've been writing my story, sending it to Dan. He sends me the links, and I send it out on Twitter.
Writing stories in 140-character segments is a long way from using a typewriter and faxing stories back to Ottawa. The media industry has changed dramatically in 50 years, but Martin's devotion to local sport hasn't.
A very, very rewarding and satisfying career to work that long with one company. It wasn't a job that I was stressed over or worried about. It was a job I enjoyed. I enjoyed researching, and I enjoyed sports. I enjoyed writing. It's a long time, but looking back, it did go quick, and it's still going. Not there quite at the finish line yet.
All right, thank you very much. The first speaker I'm going to be calling up is Russell Mills. He's got a long career of service for our community too. Today I guess he's speaking as the Ottawa Citizen's past publisher of 16 years, so that would make him Martin's boss once upon a time, and I believe a friend now too. So come on up, Russell Mills.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here today. Well, I had the good fortune to be the editor and publisher of The Citizen for many years, when we could take credit for all the great work that Martin did in sports. And I really think because of Martin's work, The Citizen really probably did have the best amateur sports coverage of any newspaper in the country. There was nobody quite in Martin's class. Martin had, as we're being honored here today, for 50 years of covering sports in Ottawa. And Martin was at The Citizen for 39 years, 20 months, and 20 days, as he tells me. Now, why that wasn't 40 years and 8 months, I'm not quite sure. Maybe but that's Martin's precision on how many years he spent working at the newspaper. And I can tell you how all of this started. In 1973, I was a young assistant managing editor of The Citizen, and among my responsibilities was looking after the summer program. We hired, in those days, 7 or 8 students for the summer, and we tried to give them a broad experience during the summer, and then the lucky ones who were graduating got a job at the end of the summer if they were any good. And at the end of the summer in 1973, we were very impressed with the work Martin had done over the summer. But there weren't any reporting jobs and no openings in the sports department. So the best job we could offer him was as chief office boy. This became known as chief office person in less sexist times. But when I asked Martin for a CV so I could be sure I had all the elements of his career correct, copy of the note that I wrote him in 1973 offering him this job, which is typical of Martin. And we're certainly glad he accepted that copy boy job, which led to everything he's done today. Martin's contribution to the Ottawa Citizen in all those 39 years was enormous. He not only did many things for the newspaper, but he made a lot of friends for us as well, because Martin's thoroughness, his smiling face, his enthusiasm, and his passion for accuracy were things that endeared him to all the people he covered. And I was fortunate to get a lot of some of the copies of the congratulatory notes he received in that time. And Martin was a bit unusual in being a sports writer in those days, in that he was so thoroughly organized. I remember when he went off to cover the Olympics with Eddie McCabe once, and Eddie told me he was the only sports writer he ever met who was so diligent about folding his underwear and making sure he had clean socks to wear every day. Most sports writers might change their socks once a week. While Martin was at the Citizen, he covered 6 Olympic Games and wrote hundreds of stories about Paralympic athletes in their local and their international competitions. As the 20th century was nearing its end in 1999, Martin spent 4 months researching and writing a feature called Ottawa's Top 100 Sports Icons, which we ran over several weeks in countdown fashion. For years, he compiled the high school best supplement, a 6-page tribute to local athletes, which was a huge job, and I'm sure there was never a mistake in any of it because of Martin's diligence. And it also included the high school sports rankings. In addition to all of his reporting and editing, as I said, Martin made a lot of friends in the Citizen because people knew that the quality of his work would always be superb. So over the past 50 years, Martin Cleary has helped, I think, to make the local sports community more vibrant and integrated than it would have been without his work, having people to understand each other. And he also brought great respect to the newspaper as well. He's been, to my mind, an outstanding example of journalism at its best and what it can do for a community. Unfortunately, newspapers nowadays are struggling a bit. They don't have the resources they used to have. They don't have reporters that can be dedicated to beats the way Martin was to amateur sports. People just can't bring the level of depth and understanding that Martin always did to his work, which is unfortunate. So Martin, I'd like to thank you again for all you've done for the Ottawa sports community and for us at the Ottawa Citizen. And I'm sure glad you accepted that copy boy job. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Russell, and glad to hear that Martin keeps clean socks. I don't know if I would have liked the rest of the folks if they're just changing them once a week, but that's definitely a reason why we wanted to keep him involved with the Ottawa Sports Pages too. Next, I'm going to be passing the mic to Todd Nicholson. I guess he's not quite a 50-year career in sport, would we be able to say, but he's certainly been on the scene for a majority of Martin's career. 5-time Paralympian in para-ice hockey or sledge hockey. He's got a full set of Paralympic medals. Also, the chair of On the Podium recently received the Mayor's Cup for his standing contribution to sport in Ottawa from the Ottawa Sports Awards. So he's involved from the local level up to the top international level. Here we go, Todd Nicholson.
Thanks very much. When I was going through all of the pictures, I noticed most of the people started back at when you started your career, Dan. Unfortunately, I started at the other end, and as I went along, I was getting younger and younger as the pictures were going there. But I noticed that you never aged. So I'm not sure how you did that, but in looking at all the pictures, I think about one picture for me and I realize you're a storyteller, and that's something that we're all very passionate about, and thanks to you, a lot of people in this room and a lot of people both nationally and internationally are being recognized for some of that stuff. But this picture to me really describes it all, and the picture on that for those who can't see it, it's every piece of sports equipment you could possibly imagine. And it's because Dan didn't just cover one sport. He covered so many sports, so many athletes. As been mentioned already, from the grassroots programming all the way up to our elite athletes. I was very fortunate to be one of those grassroots athletes that Dan covered early on in my career, and he followed me along throughout my whole career and gave me the opportunity to really surround myself with the right people. Because Dan, you taught me
Martin.
Martin, you taught me very early on that if you surround yourself with the right people, you can accomplish so many things. And that was something that for me, I was able to really accomplish by surrounding myself with the right people. I attribute a lot of my success, both in sport as an athlete, but also now on the administration side of things, to the people that I've surrounded myself with. They're the ones that have pushed me, knew how to push me and when to push me when I needed to be pushed. But, you know, when we look at Paralympic sport, back when I first started competing, Paralympic sport wasn't a big popular demand. But you took it under your wing, you provided as much as you possibly could to the resources and to the athletes to really help them achieve success. And I think that there's a lot of stories that you have told over the years that those athletes' careers today are successful because of the work and time and commitment that people like yourselves have put into it. So thank you very much for all of the work that you're doing there. As somebody who's traveled internationally, nationally, and been to 19 Olympic, Paralympic Winter Games now, it really has been an unbelievable journey. But seeing the stories that you have written about our youth, about our athletes here in Canada, have taken them all to a whole nother level. It's not something that I see on international writing. So it's something that you should be very proud of. You're taking these individuals, sharing their stories and their family stories. And that's something that really, for all of us as athletes, we wouldn't be able to push ourselves to where we have been if it wasn't for the support of our families. Because, let's be honest, sport is not a place where I'm going to be. At the same time, it's one of those things where it will strive me to want to do more, to give back to my community, so that we can have the next up-and-coming athlete be successful, strive to do the best they possibly can. And as I said, you know, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I think 50 years of your career, you've loved what you've done. And you've never had to actually have to work for it, to a certain extent. And speaking to your wife, and I've seen your mom here as well, some of the stories that you've told over the years have allowed us as athletes to be successful. So thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart, and many athletes as well, for allowing us to share our vision of what we wanted to do and what we wanted to accomplish, and for you to share that story with the rest of Ottawa and the surrounding area. As stories continue to grow and as people continue to grow, there's very few places, especially restaurants. I don't go shopping at grocery stores on Tuesdays when it's Seniors Days, because people know who you are. People know who I am, and it's because of you. It's because of the stories that you've shared, and it's because of the things that you've been able to accomplish throughout your career. Please know that you have inspired so many others to follow through on their careers, whatever they may be. My motto has always been to never give up on your dreams. And some of those dreams are because of writers like you who have pushed us to strive to do the best we possibly can without even knowing what the end goal is. So again, thank you very much. Thanks to everybody who took the time to come in today and honor you and everything that you've done. To your family, thanks for sharing your dad with us. As a dad now in sport, and as somebody who has really pushed the limit, I think, when it comes to sport. I've had the opportunity to represent Canada on the international stage in 6 sports. And my parents followed me around the world. But when they couldn't, they relied on people like you to tell our story, to share our story, so that the people back home could know what it was like. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Todd. So inspiring too. You know, we came up with a figure of maybe 10,000 plus stories that Martin's written over his career. To hear the impact that it makes on one athlete gives you a bit of an impression what that means times 10,000, right? Unbelievable. Next, I'm gonna call up Martin to say a few words. I'm very glad that we're able to do that. To be honest, he's a very humble man. So to get this day organized, I contacted his family first to make sure it would be, you know, something he was comfortable with, and also so he couldn't say no. I wanted to share a quick story about how humble he is, in fact. So we happened to have a call last May 12th, 2022. I think maybe we were planning for high school best coming up, which high school athletes were you going to profile and all that. And at the start of the call, I said, happy anniversary. I wasn't quite sure if the date was right, you know, but I thought maybe I had it. And Martin says, oh, yes, I think you're right. It's been about 9 years since I had my double hip replacement surgery. And of course I laughed, and I said, well, yes, congrats on that too, but I think it was 49 years since you started reporting at the Ottawa Citizen. So that's an example. Certainly he has no regard for his own fame. It's all about covering the athletes and the sports figures in our community. So we're definitely happy to give you a bit of recognition today. So yeah, it's my pleasure to call up 50 years sports reporting veteran, Martin Cleary.
Well, this doesn't quite feel right. I'm supposed to be out there and somebody else is up here talking, and I report on that. But I appreciate everyone coming today. It's this only happens once every 50 years, and it's not going to happen again for another 50 years. So, I appreciate the kind words that Russ and Todd just had, and just looking at all the screens and all the stories that Dan posted, I figured that's an awful lot of work. But it was fun. It was good work because of cooperation from everyone, from coaches to athletes to officials to administrators to parents who I would contact first in the case of young athletes to talk to their son or daughter. And rarely did I ever come across a hurdle. And that made the job so much easier and so much more enjoyable. I think if you were to ask my wife, Nancy, to tell you something unique about me, she might mention my love of numbers. Nancy tells me that my love of numbers has to do, or is the first sign of me having obsessive compulsive disorder. I say nay. I've been to doctors for 72 years, and not one doctor has ever said that. But upon further thought, she's probably right. My fascinations started probably when I was a young kid in Toronto, very young, single-digit age. I would take some some days I would take my wagon down to the corner of Windermere and Waller with a pad and pencil. Even back then I had a pad and pencil. And I would count vehicles and buses and whatever that went by. Why I did that, I have no idea. It's just something a kid does. And then that fascination for numbers moved on to baseball box scores and other sports where I would look at the numbers and review the numbers and study the numbers just to get a good understanding of sport. It got a little crazy one year when I typed out the entire box scores for all of the St. Louis Hawks basketball games. St. Louis Hawks because I used to listen to their games on KMOX radio when I lived in Toronto. So I typed out all their box scores and kept them in a little folder. And if that wasn't bad enough, in 1968, I typed out the results from the Summer Olympics in Moscow, just to, again, more statistics, more knowledge. And that's where it started to build, my interest in sports writing. But I've mentioned numbers, so today's numbers will be 12 and 50. May the 12th. Someone like Katharine Hepburn had her birthday on May the 12th, as did George Carlin, and as did someone in this room, Marilyn Redmond, a good friend and neighbor. It's her birthday too. But it's also National Shades Day, National Limerick Day, and one of my favorites, National Nutty Fudge Day. Not that I eat a lot of nutty fudge, but it just sounded good. So. But personally, as mentioned before, 9 years ago at this moment, I would have been in surgery in the General Hospital having both my hips replaced. And for someone who is really back offish and on some things, or at least in the past, I made the bold decision with my wife Nancy to go ahead and have not one of my hips, but both of my hips done at the same time. Why? It just seemed to make sense. And I figured, if they're going to freeze the area, it's going to be like dental going. They're going to freeze the area, fix the tooth, and that's gone. So freeze the area, fix the hips, and it'll come out of it. Well, it took a while. It took about 2 or 3 months to really fully recover, but it was actually worth it. So, but when I think of May the 12th, the best way to celebrate, or for celebrating May the 12th, is it's the start of my journalism career at the Ottawa Citizen as a summer student. And we had some wonderful students in that program. Bruce Ward was in the program, Paul Workman, Carol Gore, people who have gone on to do some great things. And I was fortunate to be part of that group and move on from there. It was had some great assignments, met some wonderful people, and then I was hired full time. I spent a little time at Action Line, which was back then was a consumer voice for people with problems, and we would take that issue and deal with the people and try to come up with a resolution for them. But shortly after that, I was hired full-time in sports because there was an opening in there. And so I won't take you through all of my 50 years of sports journalism 1 year at a time, because we'll be here until tomorrow's lunch. But there's times when I was thinking about this event, how did I reach this wonderful milestone, which is being celebrated through the cooperation and kindness of Dan Plouffe and Ottawa Sports Pages. I guess it sort of started back when I was a kid. I was really quite shy, and I'm not quite sure how I got into journalism, because being shy isn't one of the strong characteristics, but it's something I sort of grew out of and sort of forced myself to grow out of. In school, my report cards were good, but the teachers always told my parents during interviews that I I needed to read more. But reading wasn't high on my priority list when it was better to play or deal with more numbers. But one thing I enjoyed writing, I remember the first story I wrote, I was watching an NFL football game on TV in our living room in Toronto, and I showed the story to my father. He read it and said, "That's good." So that made me feel good too. And during a school assignment, I wrote a story about Father David Bauer's Olympic hockey team in 1964. And I felt good about that too. So I figured that maybe I've got a chance to be a sports writer in the future. So at that time, as you're going through as a kid, a lot of things go through your mind. And I wanted to be a garbage man, and I also wanted to be an NBA basketball player. I even took a book out of the libraries on how to be a basketball player. It didn't do me much good. So, but I was so I figured, well, let's try journalism. So I applied and was accepted at Ryerson Polytechnical Institute, which went on to become Ryerson University and is now Toronto Metropolitan University. And I graduated from there after 3 years and was hired after an interview with Russ Mills and Nelson Scoos. Russ and Nelson went to 3 different universities in Ontario. I understand they interviewed about 250 people, and I was one of the fortunate ones to be hired for the program and later became a full-time reporter with the paper. I worked almost 40 years at the Citizen, and it was wonderful. I had, being in sports, I had a chance to interview thousands of athletes in about 50 to 60 different sports, most of which I had no idea about the sport. And so, but that's where the organizers come in, because they sell the sport to me. They sold it to me, and they give you the basics, and then and I ran with it from there. And it was a lot of fun. I wrote a full range of stories. I remember one time there was a young basketball player. She scored, I think, every point for her team to win the elementary school basketball championship. Then I went ahead and progressed, and I had a chance to write about Ottawa's great Olympians, including Glenroy Gilbert, Elizabeth Manley, Todd Nicholson, and Paralympics. So there's, it sort of gets you excited, because when you see them achieving something, it makes the whole process come alive, and it makes it a little easier to do. I've got just watching the video there and seeing I don't know what all this is, because I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but I think it looks like there's clips of stories I've written in the past. And I thank Dan for that, because that's an awful lot of work. Just to find the stories and then print them all off and present them that way. It's a little overwhelming. But I've had many memories of what I've done. Obviously too many to mention, but I'll mention a couple that sort of stand out as interesting. Not my best, not my favorites, but really interesting. In 1975, I started the Sports Roots page, which was featured in the Sunday Citizen once a week, and I would write a feature story, a notes column, and I would select 4 athletes of the week. I did that for 2.5 years. What happened was when it came out, one manager said the best thing the Citizen had seen in quite a while. And 2.5 years later, another manager said, "Well, you're ghettoizing the news. We're going to have to shut it down." So now everyone has a different opinion, but I took that aspect of writing about amateur sport, just converted it to something else, and was able to continue doing what I was doing in a different format. Figure skating was one of my main stories over the years. I got that beat because I was the youngest in the sports department, the newest in the department. So let's give it to Martin, which I didn't mind. But then again, I knew nothing about figure skating. but you talk to the right people, you get the right information, and you get then you start to learn. At the 1978 World Championships here in Ottawa, I interviewed the Soviet Union's Irina Rodnina and Alexander Zaitsev. They were the world champions at the time. I asked them for an interview. They said, sure. But when the interview was over, they said, oh, we missed our bus back to the hotel. And I said, well, I could drive you back. I said, they said, okay. It was a little bit nerve-wracking because here we have two world champions from, at that time, a communist country with their renowned coach. We all cram into my 1974 Toyota Corolla, and I drive them back to the Holiday Inn on Kent Street in a snowstorm. Fortunately, it all worked out, and there was no diplomatic issues. At one point, I had my royal moment. I was offered an interview with Monaco's Prince Albert. He was a major sports enthusiast and loved participating and representing Monaco in bobsleigh. He was in Ottawa for the International Bobsleigh Congress, and I interviewed him for 30 minutes, which is probably 25 minutes more than he thought I should have. But I just kept asking questions, he kept answering, and I figured, okay, we got something going. So, but that was my moment with royalty. For many years, I wrote about high school sports, and I was never a varsity athlete myself at high school. I tried out, but I think I made the Bantam B team in grade 9 one year. I learned to love that level of competition through the athletic director at the school, Father John Redmond. His focus was track and field and cross country, but every morning he would post the results of how the power athletes did the day before in all different sports. So he had a love of sports, which I think I hooked into. For the last 7 years at the Citizen, I produced a multi-page section called High School Best, which focused on the high school athletes of the year. And there's some wonderful athletes there, and I tried to tell their stories. There are either 4 or 6 athletes, depending on the amount of space. And then I would give little bios and pictures of all the other athletes for as many schools as I could get. My goal was always to get every high school, but it never quite worked out. It's a busy time of the year for high school teachers and coaches to get the information, but I think it worked out overall. And for the last 4 years, I worked at the Citizen full time. I wrote a blog, and it was called "Scouring the Sidelines." And there's one time I went out to the Terry Fox athletic facility to cover a high school track meet, and I was walking towards an athlete who, I think a coach directed me, said, "That's the person you want to talk to." So I was going over to him, and he saw me coming, and he said, "Are you scouring the sidelines?" I said, "Yes, I am, and I'm looking for you." And we both laughed, and it was a bit of an icebreaker because we had never met and talked before, but it was a good way to sort of start a conversation. After I took the bio from the Citizen, I did some freelance writing on amateur sports and wrote a column for about 8 years, bi-weekly for the Citizen and eventually the Sun. And that it ran until about March 2020 when the pandemic hit and the freelance budget was cut. And that was too bad because it, sort of for a month I didn't know what to do because I still had this interest in amateur sport and writing and getting that news out. But I was wondering that, I kept seeing these little tidbits. And I figured, there's an item, I should be writing about that. So what I did is I started to write stories on my Twitter account. And Dan saw that, and he said, we should talk. So we talked, and I started to write for Ottawa Sports Pages.ca about 2.5 years ago. And I think I'm up to about almost 645 stories over 2.5 years. So I remember when I first joined, Dan made a big pronouncement, and I'm kind of a humble guy, so it was a little overwhelming, but he said Dan mentioned it was the biggest free agent catch that the papers had. And I can't remember how many million I signed for either. But I know I've got a contract renewal coming up, so it's hard to fathom that I've been able to connect the dots to make it to 50 years. And there won't be another 50 years. Well, maybe of living, but maybe not of always writing, so. Well, maybe not even living either, so. At some point, I'll give the keyboard as well as myself a good rest and take a look at retirement from probably the proper perspective. So when Dan told me about the recognition luncheon today several weeks ago, I was shocked and humbled. I only thought that he had talked to my family about 3 or 4 months ago, but it was more than a year ago. So kudos to everyone who kept the secret, because I had no idea. I was scooped, and for someone who's supposed to know what's going on in amateur sport, I had no idea. So, I can't thank Dan enough for taking the idea and developing it into a wonderful recognition of my career. This is truly special and means a lot to me. And it means a lot to my family as well. There's just so many to thank, and I'll mention a few. Going right back to the journalism teachers I had at Ryerson, who gave me the basics, the understanding of what the field's all about and how to do it properly, going through all the different courses and assignments. I thank all of my 15 or so sports editors, some who are here today: Tom Casey, Hugh Dabby, Doug Fisher. I thank you for all your guidance and assistance and help. And also thank Dan again. And I did some magazine writing for Canadian Running and 55 Plus magazines, and I appreciate the help that they gave. A big thank you to all the athletes, coaches, officials, administrators who put some of their time aside to allow to talk to me and so I can understand who they are and what their stories are. And thank you to the readers, because every so often you hear from the readers, good way and bad way, but that's the way the business is sometimes. They would pick up the phone, give me a call, or send an email, or in the good old days they would even write a letter and to suggest a story idea, or maybe send a note of thanks. I thank especially my family, Nancy, Andrew, Emily, for their support, encouragement, and understanding. Especially when I couldn't make it home every night for dinner. And Nancy had to pick me up at 9 o'clock. I didn't want to take the bus. As well, I'd like to thank everyone in this room who's come. You've gone out of your way and your busy schedules to come to say congratulations for 50 years. And I truly mean it that I appreciate you coming and sharing this event with me. And, thank you very much.
Martin, don't sit down just yet. We've got a little presentation here for you as well. I'd like to call up the Mayor of the City of Ottawa, Mark Sutcliffe.
Thank you. Great to be here today. And I'm only here, the original plan was that Ryan Reynolds was going to do this presentation, but then he had to pull out at the last minute. So, but I'm really glad to be here. This is a really special occasion. I started doing some freelance writing for the Ottawa Citizen in the sports department in the late 1980s. And at that time, it felt like Martin had already been at the Citizen for about 30 years. So I think the math might be a little wrong, Martin. That was 30-something years ago. But Martin was already well established as an institution in the world of amateur sports in our city, and he went from there to becoming really a legend. And this labor of love, Martin, that you have carried out for so many years of covering amateur sports, covering the stories that nobody else would cover, that nobody else would share, telling the stories of the people of our community who are doing amazing things has just been remarkable. So I'm honored to be part of this. It's great to be here with many of my former Ottawa Citizen colleagues and your family and friends, and I wanted to share this letter of commendation with you, Martin, to honor your 50 years and mark this very special occasion.
I don't know if it's the one over there on the table, but among the old articles that we pulled out was from the Beijing Olympics. So Martin was assigned to report on the Olympics, and so his story is at the top of the page. I believe at the bottom of the page there was Mark Sutcliffe from the couch or something like that. So that was kind of neat. So, certainly we're happy to have someone who knows the media industry well here, and of course representing the city of Ottawa. So yeah, thank you very much for that. We do have one final presentation. I'd like maybe Martin's family to assist me. Wife Nancy, son, oh, that's embarrassing, Andrew, and daughter Emily. Thanks. So yeah, come on up, and Martin, come on up too. We didn't stage this in advance, I apologize, but come here and we'll do one more. So Martin covered probably about 1 million medal wins, but I don't think he won too many himself, unless they've got like a new category for hip replacements. I don't know. So today that streak's going to end. We want to present you the gold medal for excellence and dedication in covering Ottawa sports news for 50 years. That's going to be just about it. I have a few thank yous to share as well too. RA Center for hosting this event. Beautiful setup here. Bytown Catering for the lunch we enjoyed. Martin's family for helping me pull this together. My mom's getting a thank you too. She went through. She's probably the most familiar with Mark's work out of anyone in this room. She scoured through a lot of these stories to help pick out one from each year of his career too. She's also the friendliest bodyguard you'll ever see. Some of you did ask about making donations to the Ottawa Sports Pages Fund, so you're welcome to visit her in the back corner later. I know some had asked to do that in person. You don't have to hurry up. Feel free to stick around and check out our displays. There's a physical guest book you can sign over there on the table, and we're going to, if you sign the one online, we're going to print out those comments to add to it as well too. So yeah, say hi and congrats again to Mark. He's not on deadline today. That's super.
Thanks, Dan.
No problem. Thanks everyone here for joining us, and thank you again, Martin, for all you've done.